My name is Lisa Shaw, and today's episode is all about the 1940s. The 40s were all about accessories, and today I'm going to show you how to do an embroidered clutch that has all over embroidery. So this simple scroll design was evident to me that it would make a nice purse flap if I simply mirrored, imaged it, butted them up together, and it created a nice smooth curve that would be wonderful on the edge of a purse. So once I've created my embroidery design and I have it set into my two hoopings using my software, I wanted to create a running stitch line that would be built into the first design that mirror imaged accurately this curve shape. So let's prepare our fabric. All the measurements for these pieces are available online. The outer fabric I chose was a knit fabric, so I needed to make it perfectly stable by fusing it with a tricot fusible interfacing. That allows me to use a tearaway stabilizer when I'm doing my embroidery design. From that same outside fabric, you're going to cut the two side panel pieces. The lining fabric is simple cotton fabric, and I use a fusible batting that's attached to the back of it. And once I have my fabric prepared, I am now ready to go to the embroidery machine. So I need to take my fabric and place it in my hoop. I'm going to simply lay it in my hoop, and this is a technique that is commonly called floating. I'm going to float my fabric in my hoop and secure it in place just temporarily with a couple pieces of temporary tape that's not going to leave a mark on my fabric. So I have it simply attached. I'm going to take my hoop and go to my machine. Securely attach my hoop and load my first design, and you'll notice that the first color is a basting stitch. And that allows me to secure the fabric to the hoop. And because my fabric is just laying on top, I would use my hands to just simply hold it so that it doesn't do anything nasty. And it bastes it in place, and this is nice and secure so that you won't get any shifting and you can stitch your embroidery design. You have to remember that we stabilize the fabric with the tricot, and that allows me to use a tearaway with a knit, which is against the rules. Once our basting stitch is in place, we can start stitching our design. The color thread that I have loaded is exactly the same as color number 1 of the actual design. It does not matter what color that is. Lower my presser foot, and I can start stitching my design. Once it has completed, I can take this out of the hoop and trim away my stabilizer. Now, let's remove this out of the way here. One thing you want to pay attention when you're trimming your stabilizer is to simply carefully cut right along this back bottom line, and you can leave the rest of the stabilizer on. We'll remove that later. We're going to take our second hoop, and we have to figure out a way to line up design number 1 with design number 2, which is going to be stitched. To do that, I have a line of stitching that's going to match this last line here in design number 1, and that's going to stitch as the first color in hoop number 2. So I need to go back to the embroidery machine and stitch my line of stitching onto my stabilizer. And we're now going to stitch the line that will line up our two designs. So I have it advanced. And it's just putting a simple line of stitching in our stabilizer so that we can line it up with the line of stitching that was in the other design. So I'm going to remove my hoop from my machine. And let's go back to the table and line up our lines. So I take my design that I have carefully trimmed, And I place my lines of stitching on top of each other so that they're going to be even. It's real easy to lift up and double check what you're doing. And we will have our temporary tape that's going to help us hold in place, because the basting stitch that we're going to put in next is what is going to actually hold the designs in their proper location. It's going to hold the fabric in place. So now we're ready to go back to the machine. Going to attach my hoop. Careful not to move your fabric. We have our basting stitch, which is loaded to the machine. I'm going to hit the start button. And just like before, our basting stitch is attaching our fabric to the tearaway stabilizer, and then it will stitch the rest of this design in the exact location that you need it to be to make the all-over embroidery design. Now I'm going to stop the machine and go back to the table and show you where I have my completed embroidery design. Because now we have done all of our embroidery, and you will now want to turn your embroidery over and pull away all of your stabilizer. I find that if I clip all of my bobbin threads first, the tearaway just comes right off. So you're going to want to take some time and tear away all of your stabilizer out of the way. And once you do that, you'll have a finished design like this one. Now I line up my backing piece with my embroidered piece, and I'm going to use that stitching line that I have already placed in the embroidery design, which is the last color on the flap, and I'm going to use that as my guide for stitching my two pieces together. Once you've stitched around all three sides, I do a partial on the bottom here so that I can clip my curves and turn my purse inside and out. Now I didn't sew the last side because I want to show you how to finish this. All these instructions are available on the website, but sometimes it helps just to see a few of the extra steps that it took. So we have this side is all turned out. Now we're going to take our pieces for our side pieces, and we're going to fold them in half and stitch down the two sides. Once they are stitched, I like to grade the seams and turn under about 1/4 inch and press it nice and flat, because you're going to sew a seam. You're going to turn it to the other direction and sew a seam to close that flap. So we have our seams graded. We're going to turn it inside out, press it flat, sew our side seam. Once you have this piece, you're going to do this for both pieces. You're going to fold them right sides together longwise and stitch along the bottom portion so that the folded piece is at the top. Kind of creates a little pucker pleat that's going to be working for our purse here. So we have our clutch. This is a very forgiving pattern, and that's for ease of my sewing, and I think you'll be able to find it very simple for you to use your sewing skills for. So the way I finish it using this piece is I have my folded seam that matches the fold that we have turned from our purse. I use my clips and hold them together, the two sides. I then fold up the other side and use my clips again to sew up the other side of the seam. We're going to do this on both sides so that it's nice and even. So now when you look at your finished purse, it just has a simple running stitch side. I also attached a snap on the inside, or your favorite type of closure, and voila, you now have a very simple embroidered clutch.